Patita Shri Guru Tam Natosmi Gurave Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadaya Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Ananda Leelamaya Vigrahaya Hema Padvilazami Sundaraya Tasmai Mahaprema Rasapradaya Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandaya Namo Namaste Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshya Chiptastakam Sharanam Prapanam Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Vrinde Namaste Charanarvindam Govinda Namo Dharamadavedi Govinda Namo Dharamadavedi Govinda Namo Sham Sundar Shikanda Shikar Smraha Sumurli Manohara Radhika Raskumama Kripanidhi Supir Jana King Kurim Kuru Tavairasmi Najivami Dayavana Iti Vikaya Devi Tam Namam Charanantikam. First of all, I offer my Sastang Dandavat Puspanjali, my hearts like flowers, thousands and thousands of times at the lotus feet of my holy master, my supremely worshipable spiritual Gurudev, Asmadhyaya Paramarajata Maguru Pada Padma, Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Ashtotara Satasisimat, Rupa Nogacharya Varya, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami. Jai. Secondly, I offer my pranam to my Guru's Guru, to Srila Prabhupada, and to all the spiritual masters in our tradition going back thousands of years to Sri Krishna himself. And finally, I offer my pranam to all my dear brothers and sisters, So yesterday, most of you were in attendance to the celebration of the life and characteristics of Roy Ramananda. So it was very elevated subject, very elevated katha. Today we are coming back down to earth, to the reality on the ground, which is the confinement of our consciousness within the limited, conditioned, material mind. Because that is where we are at the moment. Something we should understand very clearly. Not get carried away in any speculations and fantasies. We are here in this wellness center where everyone is very familiar with the anatomy of the physical body But we find in modern times there is little to no familiarity with the Shukshma Sharir. That means the subtle body, the astral body. We are Atma, the soul, Atma. And we are covered by two bodies. This gross physical body, composed of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and Akash, ether. And then we have a Shukshma Sharir, a subtle body, the astral body, the psychological body. It's really a thing. From the perspective of modern psychology, they consider that all mental processes are byproducts or emergent properties of the physical brain. So this is called epiphenomenalism, that all mental states are the byproducts or emergent properties of the physical structures of the brain. So this is quite wrong, and it's based on a prejudice, because our sensory perceptions only can see so far. And so we can perceive and identify fluctuations in the brain on a chemical level, on an electronic level. That would be technically the element of fire in the Vedic cosmology. But we can't go past the fire element to the movement of the air, the pran. Pran is also functioning in the brain. And to the akash, to the ethereal element. What to speak of the actual subtle body proper. And so a type of prejudice comes, which is really unwarranted. It's an unwarranted prejudice. It's exactly like looking and seeing the horizon in the distance and then saying, there's nothing beyond that horizon because I can only see that far. Is that reasonable? It's completely unreasonable. Completely unreasonable. Yet that's the state of the modern analysis of psychology. There are reasons for that also. And that will become clear as we go a little bit more deeper into this seminar today on the basic understanding of psychology from the perspective of Vedanta. Jivera nistara lagi sutrikol vyas Mayavadi basha shunle hoy savanash. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Srila Vyasadeva has given the philosophy of Vedanta, the Vedanta Sutras, in order to deliver us all from our ignorance. But if you have some follow impersonal interpretation, such as the Advaitavad of Shankaracharya, then everything will be spoiled. So luckily we have the best commentary, the best explanation of Vedanta Sutra, called Srimad Bhagavatam. Artho yam brahmasutranam bharatata vininayo gatri prasarupaso vedata paribrahmita. Artho yam brahmasutranam, that Vyasadeva has explained the 559 sutras of Vedanta in 18,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. He's explained and illustrated them there. So we're looking at a verse today from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is explaining something regarding the functions of our subtle body, our astral body, which is responsible for all of our psychological states. So, your psychological body itself is composed of elements finer than the gross elements. They are 4 in number. Manas, the element of mind. Mind is actual thing. It's a substance, a fine substance. And mind is, its property is sankalpa vikalpa, accepting and rejecting things. on the basis of previous experiences. So you like something or you don't like something because in the past something like that, something similar to that object caused you some happiness, so you like it, or some distress. So that's how the mind works. Then manas, then the next element is buddhi, intelligence. Intelligence, the movement of intelligence causes our changes of state that make us sometimes awake and sometimes dream and sometimes go into deep sleep. So the movement of buddhi causes us to experience these three states of wakefulness, dream and deep sleep. Buddhi is also responsible for memory, smriti, memory, and imagination. And also, when objects come before our senses, identifying them. So that process of identification basically involves the memory. The next element is called ahankar, ego. Ego, ahankar. And then the last element is chitta. Chitta is by nature very luminous, very bright, and it's niskriya. It doesn't have any activity. And it's the last covering of the soul. Before you get to the soul, the last covering is called chitta. That element of chitta, when it's in the universe, because all the elements of our body are present in the universe. The universe is like a macrocosm, and our body is like a microcosm of the universe. Though they are not non-different. In some philosophies it's considered the body and the universe is the same thing. Microcosm and macrocosm in that way, but it's not like that. The universe is big and our body is small. And it's a particular yantra. The body is a particular yantra, a machine on a minute scale, which includes the elements which are found in the rest of the universe. So when the element of the chitta is in the universe, it's called mahatattva. Or conversely, you can say when the element of mahatattva is present in the universe, in our body, in our subtle body, then it's called chitta. So it's niskriya, it doesn't do anything. But what it can do, it is become polluted. By nature, it's sattvic. And when it becomes, the chitta becomes polluted by tamagun, ignorance, then it transforms and becomes ahankar, ego. And when the ego is a portion of the ego which is, there's tamagun there, but a portion of it which is somewhat more sattvic than the rest, that makes the element of mind. And the more predominantly rajasic portion of the ego transforms and becomes buddhi, intelligence. And the most tamasic portion becomes sound, and then all the gross elements come. This is the basic diagram schema, if you like, of the elements of the universe and how they're related to each other. So we can say that the mahatattva or chitta is the original element coming from the unmanifest totality of energy, prakriti. That's the first element, it's sattvic. And all the others are, they are evolutes of that, becoming progressively more rajasic, tamasic, and like this. So the spectrum of the elements comes out. So, in essence, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego, they're all gradually, if we start from chitta, then you have ego, mind, and intelligence. They're progressively more contaminated forms of chitta. They're transformations of the same thing. Just like if you have milk and you can turn it into yogurt, and the yogurt you can churn and make butter, and the butter you can heat and melt and make ghee, like this. It's basically one substance, it's just milk, but it goes through these 4 stages of transformation. So your subtle body is like that. It's essentially chitta, and then some tamasic portion becomes ahankara, and then manas and buddhi, like this. Okay. Now, this darkened portion of the chitta is simply a collection, a condensed conglomerate of samskars, impressions. So when you are moving around in the world, your cameras are rolling all the time, your eyes are filming everything, ears are recording everything, and all that information is going and it's leaving impression in the chitta. So when millions of impressions of the gross physical world are condensed together in that chitta, it becomes crowded, it becomes darkened. Because the physical elements are manifestation of tamas. And now all these impressions of tamas have collected within the chitta and darkened it. And so that darkened mass of impressions within the chitta is called ahankara, ego. So that ego is the darkened portion of the chitta, and that's our subconscious mind. So something was true about when the psychoanalysts, they say that, well, we're all under the control of the dictates of our subconscious mind. That much is right. A lot of the rest was just made up. But that part is right. So in the chitta, that's the subconscious mind. The impressions are there forming the ego. And then you have your mind, which is the conscious mind. And the buddhi, the intelligence, acts as the go-between, between the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. And so that's how you recognize things. That's how you understand things. Is when something comes before you, you see it. And then the buddhi, your intelligence, goes inside, digs around among all the impressions you've had before. Let's say you see a creature with 2 horns, and a dewlap, and an udder, and a tail, eating grass in a field. Right? So then your buddhi goes into the impressions in your chitta, looks around, and finds a creature that you've seen before just like that. And then brings that samskar, that impression, into the conscious mind, and when the two match, then you recognize. And from before, someone told you, this is a cow. You see? So this is a cow. Or this is a human being. This is a man. This is a woman. This is a tree. You see? So, this is how our thoughts are going on in real time. Now, what happens is when you're in any particular situation, then that situation triggers your buddhi, your intelligence, to try to understand, to evaluate it. And the buddhi goes into the subconscious mind and retrieves some impressions related to that situation. And related to your past experience in this life, or in previous life, or many previous lives. And then brings that into the conscious mind. And then, if in the past your relationship with that object or that situation was good, then you say, I want this. And if it was it was a state of suffering, then it comes from the subconscious mind into the conscious mind and says, I don't want this. And this is how our desires are functioning in real time. So even though we feel ourselves to be free and independent, the Vedas say we are like a bull with a ring through the nose who is being dragged here and there. So on the basis of our past impressions, our past sanskars, we are just controlled. And we're making choices. We think this is my free will, my free choice, my free independence. But it's not. Our soul is in a type of like dream state, as if asleep, watching the functions of the subtle body, and we're just flowing along with that. So that's called being in the flow of karma. That our present activities are consequences of our past activities. And that chain is going on and on and on. So that is the samsara, the repeated chain of birth and death. So there's an illusion of freedom, but not actual freedom. Only a person who's mind is controlled and who is no longer under the dictation of previous samskar, actually has some degree of freedom from the conditioning of mature existence. Now, is that clear to everyone? Okay, little overview of how the Shukshma Sharira, the subtle body, works. Who am I? Many persons think that I am not this body. Many people recognize I'm the soul. But when they think of the soul or their spirit, they just think of their own mind. They think that the mind is the self. Yes, I'm not this body, of course. But I am whatever. My soul is a Democrat or something. Or Republican or an atheist or whatever. Now, these are all conceptions just lodged in the consciousness, in the subtle body, that have nothing to do with the soul. So, Sri Krishna has explained, Jagrat swapna susuptam cha gunato buddhivrittayaha. Tasam vilakshano jiva shakshittvena vinishtitaha. He said that the state of wakefulness, Jagrat, Swapnaha, dreaming, Shushuptam, the state of deep sleep, Gunato Buddhi Brittaya, these are the functions of Buddhi. These are the functions of Buddhi coming from three gunas. Another Gunato Buddhi Brittaya, so when the mode of goodness becomes more prominent in your subtle body, then you wake up. It's not a fact that you wake up when your alarm clock goes off. Because if your alarm clock goes off, but there's not enough sattva in your subtle body, you'll just press the snooze button or turn it off and go back to sleep. Right? So we wake up when the sattva gun is rising in the subtle body. Otherwise, when rajagun is present, we dream. We're in a dream state. And when tamagun is very prominent, then we go into deep sleep, in which we are conscious, but conscious of nothing. The senses are dissolved. Even the mind at that point is dissolved. And you see, in the dream state, the mind and the senses are still functioning. But in the deep sleep, though the physical body is lying still, mind and senses are still functioning in the dream state. But in deep sleep, then mind and senses are dissolved. The soul cannot be unconscious. You say, I was unconscious. No. The conscious soul was just conscious of nothing during the deep sleep state. So the three gunas function in this way. So Krishna is saying that Tasam vilakshano jiva, the soul, who you are, is distinct from these three states. And that can be understood. Shakshitvena vinishtitaha. You can have vivek. You can have discrimination. You can separate who you are from who you are not by understanding that that conscious entity who is the witness of these changes of state is called the jiva, the soul, the atma. So you are not any of these states, you are the being witnessing this constant change that's taking place every day. I'm awake, I'm dreaming, I'm in deep sleep, dreaming, deep sleep, dreaming, deep sleep a few times, and then you wake up again. And so you're going backwards and forwards like that every day and each night. So that is the self, Atma. He's the witness. But due to the predominance of Tamagun, we don't even recognize ourselves as the witness. Our consciousness is merged with all of these changes and we think that this is me. This is who I am. And so when we hear the instruction, the explanation of these things from the lips of guru, spiritual master, or any pure Vaishnava, then that serves to awaken our vivek, our power of discrimination. But unless we follow a sadhana, a daily practice in our life, that understanding, like now you say, yes, of course. Mm-hmm. But then the next moment you'll just drift off into a dream state again and forget everything. So you'll not remain in the state of being viveki. You'll not remain in a state of constant discrimination. The power of discernment is awake. It will just switch off unless you have a daily sadhana. And if you have a daily sadhana, gradually the gunas will go down, sattva will come up. In sattva gun, the discrimination is strong. When rajas comes, though rajas is responsible for the dream state, but even though we seem to be awake, everyone's eyes are open. But if rajas is there, people spend their whole day while their eyes are open dreaming also. Right? Because instead of being here, right now, everyone's dreaming about, oh, how delicious the feast will be this evening. Or next week I'm going to get a new car, a new house, a new video game. I'm going to go on holiday, spring break. So no one's staying here, even when they're awake. All the mental functions are engaged in dreaming of future opportunities for enjoyment. And in this way, we're lost. Who am I? Atma. It's gone. It's all gone. So dreaming takes place at night and in the day. Another interesting thing about these states of consciousness, which is most wonderful. When you're asleep, your body is lying on the bed, but in your dream you have a body. So your buddhi, your intelligence, is imposing that body onto your consciousness. Right? Your physical body is lying there, but in the dream you have a body. Perhaps sometimes whoever had a dream that they could fly. Right? You had that dream? Who had a dream that they could play piano or something that they couldn't do in real life? Yeah? Okay. Like this. So you can have all these superpowers, which are actually, it must be in a previous life you had that experience, because the mind cannot produce anything that hasn't been experienced in the past. The mind cannot produce anything that hasn't been experienced in the past, but it can produce combinations of past experiences. For example, you've never seen a flying elephant, but because you've seen an elephant and you've seen a bird who can fly, then your mind, the vikalpa, the imagination portion of the buddhi, can put two impressions together and have a flying elephant. Like that, you see. So, but otherwise you can't actually even imagine things that you've never experienced either in this life or in previous lives. Not possible. And that's why if you chant and try to remember Krishna, then you cannot actually, because you've never experienced Krishna. Your buddhi, your intelligence will just go into your subconscious mind and try to, the police, they have this photo kit identities, where there's so many different eyes you can choose from, and put these eyes, and let's put this nose, put this mouth, and they try to make a picture. So that's what you do. You just get all these impressions of different things and people. Okay, Krishna's blue, let's get an impression of blue, like that. And he's a boy, let's get an impression of a boy. He's got a peacock feather, let's put a peacock feather like this. And it's an imaginary idea of who Krishna is, based on words, based on impressions, based on imagination, based on inference, based on things that you may have heard from the scripture. And these are all different types of vikalpa imagination. Shabda sanket vikalpa, imagination based on words. Sruta vikalpa, imagination based on something you heard from the scripture. And anuman vikalpa, imagination based on your own powers of inference and logic. Like this. And that's why when we want to remember Krishna, we start with his name. Because the name of Krishna actually is Krishna. And if we can become the conduit for the appearance of that divine sound of Krishna's name, shortly after that, the name will reveal his form, which is otherwise Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam. Shama Sundar, all his qualities are inconceivable. Mind cannot touch them. So we have to approach Krishna, the realization of Krishna, through the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Not through speculation. Rather, the chanting of the mantra should arrest the functions of the mind, which are producing speculation. And then, when the vrittis of the mind, the oscillations of the mind become resolved, and the entire subtle body is purified, and it becomes chitta, and you're left with pure chitta. That chitta is like a mirror, and the actual reflection of the beauty of Krishna can be caught in that mirror. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Chaito darpana marjanam, cleanse the mirror of your subtle psychological body, and that will make you fit for the perception of that which is beyond the perception of the physical senses and mind. So, Prahlad Maharaj, it was just Nishinga Chaturdasi, so it's kind of in my mind. Prahlad Maharaj, last week, did you all have a good celebration for Nishinga Chaturdasi? Yes. Good. So Prahlad Maharaj, he has defined yoga. When he was at school and his classmates asked us, oh, please tell us what you learned from your guru, because he told them, when I was in the womb of my mother, then my guru Narad Muni was telling me so many wonderful things. I said, what did you learn from your guru? So then Prahlad Maharaj was instructing all the little demons in the demon school, Asura Kul. And you see, by the association of a pure devotee, even the demons, they want to know about bhakti. So Prahlad Maharaj explained to them the meaning of yoga, the meaning of the word yoga. Brace yourself. It may be shocking. Get ready. He said, Tasmad bhavat bir karma kartavyam karmanam trigunatmakam bija niharanam yogaha pravaro paramodiha. This oscillation of the buddhi, these vrittis, these movements of the element of buddhi, is producing the experience of wakefulness, dream, and deep sleep. So as we were saying, that in a dream the buddhi is imposing upon you, superimposing upon you a rope. A rope means superimposing upon you an upadhi, a designation. You are Atma, the soul, but in your dream you think that you are the dream body that can fly and play a piano while watching the aerial performance of elephants. Right? So, all wonderful things may happen in your dream, but your buddhi is superimposing the upadhi, the designation of the body, your dream body, while you're asleep. Even though that body is not you. It's clear. You know. Well, guess what? When you wake up, the buddhi is superimposing this body onto you, but you're also not that body. So if you can understand how you are not the body and not the doer of the activities in your dream, but that is a superimposition by the function of buddhi onto your consciousness, now just extend that, and that's what's happening right now while you're awake. Now Prahlad Maharaj explains that yoga, the state of yoga, is the state in which all these functions of the buddhi are completely arrested and the buddhi dissolves into its origin. The mind and buddhi dissolve into its origin, the chitta. In other words, yoga involves the complete destruction of your mind and intelligence. It involves the complete destruction of your subtle body, because as long as they are all functioning, then you end up either dreaming that you're the dream body or dreaming that you're the physical body. That is, you're in material existence. So remember that the goal of yoga, or the goal of Krishna consciousness, is to be muktirittanyatarupam swarupena vyavastiti, to be situated in a spiritual body in the spiritual world. So we're not practicing Bhakti Yoga to make a better situation for ourselves here in North Carolina. Right? That's not what we're doing. We're aiming at the total and utter destruction of all the mental functions so that our soul can exist in the true eternal plane, our actual transcendental home. So he's saying, kartavyam, tasmad bhavad bhe kartavyam. He's saying, my dear friends, my dear demons, school friends, it is your kartavya, it is your duty. It is the duty of all of us. And what is that duty? Kamanam tri gunatmakam bija niharanam. In our subtle body are the impressions, which are the seeds of all of these states of consciousness, which are causing us to rotate in the cycle of repeated birth and death in the material world, and it's our duty to completely destroy that. And that is called yoga. Pravaho paramodhya. That means that the flow of these states of buddhi has to be completely stopped. And that is called yoga. And how will it be done? Lord Kapil Dev, he said, Yathanalaha Jarayati ashu yaha kosham nirginam yathanalaha. When you eat food, then your digestion, fire of digestion, burns that food. So he said, in the same way, by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, your subtle body becomes digested. Now that's very important concept, and the analogy is quite appropriate, because when you eat, the digestion of your food goes on by itself. You're not aware of it. You don't sit there thinking, oh, here come the protein molecules, release the appropriate enzyme, stomach, here come the carbohydrates, need another enzyme for that. So you don't consciously do all of it. You just eat and it's going on by itself. So in the same way, by engaging in the service of Krishna, hearing, chanting and remembering and serving the deity, and all the activities in the service of the spiritual master, that automatically facilitates the gradual digestion until it's a total digestion of the subtle body, the Shakshma Sharya. Now, I want to come to this verse for today from Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's a great treasure, it's a mine of priceless transcendental knowledge. So hear very carefully. You can repeat after me. Bhutanam chitradhatritvam Bhutanam chitradhatritvam Bahirantama antaramevacha Bahirantaramevacha Pranindriyatvatisnyatvam Navaso Britilakshanam Navaso Britilakshanam. Bhutanam means of the living entities. Of the, Bhutanam chitradhatitvam. Yes, of the living entities. Bhutanam is genitive plural. So, of the living entities, chidra. Chidra means a hole or a space. Essentially, chidra means a hole. So a hole is a space in something. And dhatritvam means the quality of giving. So bhutanam chitra dhatritvam, this verse is the paribhasha or the definition of akash. Akash, ether. So the 5 gross elements, this is the last one. We call it space. But space and ether, they're not, in people's minds, they're not the same. People used to believe in ether, and then when Albert Einstein's theory of relativity came along, and he found, or he proposed the speed of light was constant, and then he said, well, that means that if the speed of light is constant, then there's no resistance in space, so there's actually no elements, there's no ethereal element which is carrying it, like this. So then the idea of ether or Akash went out of fashion, along with the arrival of the theory of relativity. So, but actually there is such a thing. That discovery, first of all, it's not entirely true, that light has a constant speed. And secondly, it just means that the Akash is so fine, it does not obstruct the flow of light. So it was an unnecessary conclusion. But Srimad Bhagavatam tells us that Akash is the subtle element, and what does it do? Bhutanam chidradhatritvam, it gives space for things to move. In other words, we experience dimensionality, we experience direction, and this is because there's such a thing called Akash, space. So it's that which accommodates movement and direction. So Bhutanam chidradhatritvam, but that space, Bahir Antaram Evacha, it's not only outer space. Bahir means outer, but Antaram means inner, the inner space as well. Why? Because Pranindriya Tramadisnyatvam, Pran here means Pran. Indriya means the senses. And Atma here means the subtle body. The whole subtle body, the mind here. It doesn't mean the self. And Disnyatvam means the foundation or the field. You know, if you want to play a game, then you need a field to play upon. So what is the field which accommodates the movement of Pran, the movement of the senses, and the movements of the mind? Because we're talking about buddhi oscillating, modulating, vrittis, the vrittis, that means the motions, the movements of the mind. So movement requires some field or some space to take place. So the astonishing revelation of Srimad Bhagavatam is that it's not that the movements of the mind have one kind of space, and the movements of the pran have another space, and the movements of the senses have another space, but they all share the same field. And that, Nabaso means Akash, Vritti Lakshanam. Vritti means functions and Lakshanam means the characteristics. So these are the characteristics of the element of Akash, ether. One, it provides accommodation, room for movements. And it provides the field of activity or the foundation upon which there is interaction between the pran, the life air within the body, the senses and the mind. So Akash is the junction between your mental, that is your subtle body, and your gross body. And this is why the things that you do with your senses affect your mind. And the things that are going on in your mind spill over into sensory activities. You see? There must be a common meeting place where they affect each other. Otherwise your mind will say, I'm going to stand up. But then the body doesn't do anything. Right? Or if you take some alcohol and you drink it, and your mind is exactly the same, completely unaffected. Right? So how can this liquid in a bottle change your state of mind? There must be a crossroads where the effects of the sensory activities come in touch with the movements of the mind. And that place that facilitates, that accommodates the connection between the subtle body and the gross body is called Akash. Akash. Okay. Is everyone on board? Because we're just building this in layers. You're going to learn so many wonderful things this evening. Astonishing things. Okay. Now, Akash. So, our subtle body can expand and contract. So that is called Ullas. Ullas or Prakash. Prakash means expanding or lightening. And Ullas also has the same meaning. It means effulgence, lightening, but it can also mean increasing. So Prakash and Ullas are both used in the commentaries of the various sages on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The philosophy of mind. We've mentioned how in modern psychology, it's just, well, the mind doesn't exist. It's just, we're having all these states due to the chemical changes in the brain. But all the philosophers of India are in agreement that no, the mind is an actual thing, which is independent of, but connected to the physical body. It interacts with the physical body, so there's an effect, but it's its own element. But the different philosophers of India have different ideas. So this is the speciality of Vedanta, of Vyasadeva, especially the Vedanta is in 4 chapters, and the second chapter compares all the different philosophical ideas of the sages of the classical systems of philosophy in India. And of course the Srimad Bhagavatam is the expanded explanation of the Vedanta Sutra. So it gives you the precise explanation of what's really going on, with illustrations as well. Okay, so for example, the first classical school is known as Nyaya, the logic school of Gautam Rishi. So they say that the Surup, the nature of the mind, is that it's an atom. It's an atom, it's an indivisible element of a stuff called mind. And the reason they say the mind is an atom is because they say we can only deal with one sensory input at a time. So, for example, I'm speaking now, but if you notice something going on over there and your mind goes over there and your eyes focus on that, even though I'm speaking, then you say, oh, what did he say? You say your ears were there and they were open. You can close your eyes, you can't close your ears. Right? But still, you didn't hear it because your mind went to something visual. Like that. So the function of the mind is to prioritize perceptions. So in the school of Nyaya, the philosophers say the mind is atomic. It's tiny, indivisible, and the proof is that you can only deal with one perception at a time. But then the yoga school of Patanjali, they say that no. Look, if I'm eating something, right? If I'm eating some, let's say, they give the example of corn. Someone's eating some corn. So when you're eating it, you simultaneously see the color of the corn, the taste of the corn, the smell of the corn, and you hear the crunchy sound as you bite into it. So you're having all these perceptions simultaneously. So therefore, the philosophers of the Patanjali's school, the yoga school, they say, no, the mind isn't atomic. So then the Nyayikas, the logic school of Gautam Rishi, they say, no, it's not like that. You see, the mind is atomic and it only deals with one perception at a time, but it's very fast. And so when you're eating that corn, the mind is jumping quickly from the smell to the taste, to the sound, to the color, like this, and it's jumping from one to the other so fast. It gives you the illusion of simultaneous perceptions. So, now, the yoga school, they say, no, the mind is not atomic. The mind is all-pervading. It's everywhere. It's omnipresent. And then you have the Sankhya philosophy, that is of Kapil Dev, who says the mind is neither atomic or all-pervading. It's of a medium size, and it expands and contracts depending on which body it's in. So if the subtle body enters an ant, then it contracts and becomes the size of an ant, and it spreads out, the subtle body spreads out around the gross body. And then, if that same soul takes birth in the body of an elephant, it expands to fill the body of the elephant and give the elephant the impression that he's that big body, like that. So each of the different schools, they have their own ideas. The yogi's idea is that the mind is all-pervading. It's everywhere. But its vrittis are limited, its functions are limited, and they're limited by the ahankara, the ego. So when you have a functioning ego, it limits your mind to just what's going on right here, right now. And if you practice meditation, gradually the ego dissolves, and your vritti, it's not the mind that expands, it's the vrittis that expand, until you experience the all-pervading mind, and then you become omniscient. You become enlightened and you know everything, because your mind is everywhere. So the yogis propose that when you die, then there's no transmigration of the mind. It's not that your soul leaves and then your mind travels along with the soul to another body. Because something which is all-pervading that can't move, because it's already everywhere. So all that happens is that when you die, then the vrittis which were there in that body, the kind of cosmic all-pervading mind, just reproduces those same vrittis and impressions somewhere else in the cosmic mind. Like that. So these are the different ideas of the different philosophers. As soon as you get out of this epiphenomenalism, that the mind doesn't really exist, it's just a product of the chemicals in the brain. Now, when you actually consider, well, what is the mind and what is like, it starts to become a little bit complicated as well. And so we have to learn precisely what the mind is like from Vedanta. That Vedanta means the conclusion of knowledge. And that's explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. And if you practice, then you can actually perceive the truth of that reality. So the mind is an atom. The mind is an atom, but the vrittis of the mind, because there's pran in there, which causes it to oscillate, cause it to spread out and have functions within the akash. So now this mind, it can expand and it can contract. Now, consider this. What is it that we call happiness and we call distress? Think about it. When you do something that you like, what is it that you like? Do you like eating chocolate? Right? Okay, let's just take that. So what happens is, when you're all tense, let's say you're tense, you're cranky, and you're getting angry and with people and agitated, right? And then you think, oh. And then your buddhi, your intelligence, digs past into your past sanskars and brings up the impression of some chocolate. And then you go, ping! I had an idea. I want some chocolate. So then you go to the store and you buy whatever it is, linked 79% cacao, Swiss chocolate, your favorite brand, whatever it is, right? And then when you get that, so your mind was kind of cramped and disturbed, lots of disturbance going on. And then when you taste it, then your mind is completely focused. You go into samadhi. Not exactly samadhi. But you stop thinking about all the things that were disturbing you, right? All the things that are in the mind that were disturbing you, you forget that, and now you're focused on one thing. The taste of that chocolate. And then suddenly, you feel a certain lightness. Right? You suddenly feel so light. You feel so light. So, this is called the ullas, or the prakash. What actually happens is, because the consciousness is not flitting here and there with many vrittis, It's focused on one thing. The focus on one object causes the physical mind, or subtle, it's a subtle physical mind, within the Akash, it causes it to expand and to become illuminated. So that is called Prakasha Ullas. It's naturally, when the mind expands, it's naturally illuminated. Why? Because all these vrittis, which are crammed, all these thoughts and everything which are disturbing you in the mind, which are confined in a small space, when the chitta expands, naturally, then the density of those vrittis becomes less. You may have the same thoughts, but in a bigger space, it's not such a disturbance. Right? If you have 10 people all living in one room, then you'll go crazy. Right? But you have 10 people living in different houses in the same village, then everyone has their space. And they feel peaceful. Right? Prabhu, I need my space. Right? So your thoughts are like that. When you've got many things going on, but if you focus on one thing, there's a natural prakasha ullas, an expansion of the chitta, the subtle body, within the akash that takes place. So automatically, because the oscillation density goes down, so you feel light and peaceful. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that ashantasya kuta sukam. Without peace, what question is there of happiness? So happiness is basically what we call sukha. In Sanskrit, happiness is called sukha and distress is called dukkha. Right? So what we call happiness is simply a momentary expansion of the mind by which there's a reduction in the oscillation density, so we feel a prakashan ullas, that is a lightening of our, we feel light. People say, oh, lighten up, Prabhu. Why are you so serious? Lighten up. Why do we use these words? Yeah. Someone's thinking, oh, if I smoke this, it's going to expand my mind. Right? But it will momentarily. Then you feel that expansion of the mind, right? But then this problem is this. The mind is kind of elastic. There's a certain viscosity to the subtle body, which means that if it's stretched or expanded artificially, it twangs back. It will just contract. Once that sense object which is causing it to expand is removed or exhausted, or you've developed a tolerance to it, then the mind just goes back to the state it was before. But because of the viscosity, it actually contracts to a state which is more contracted than it was before. This is the problem. But now you have an impression of that expansion which keeps coming into your mind, making you want to repeat the experience again. And that's called addiction. You see? So, what we're looking at is we want to know how to expand our consciousness permanently. That it's not just a cheap shot, a quick thrill, which ultimately results in a gradual contraction. Everyone who has addictions becomes more and more depressed. It's a fact, right? All addictions make people become gradually more and more depressed, and this is the mechanics of it. Now, I want to share something about the beauty of the Sanskrit language. Perhaps you know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I am the sound in the akash, in ether. What's that verse? Who knows?
I am the light of the sun and the moon.
Yeah. Prabhaspi sasi surayo. Pranavasava Vedushu. I am the syllable Om in all the Vedas. I am the sound in ether and the ability in man. So that line is Shabda K Paurasham Rishu. I am Shabda, the sound in K means Ka. Ka means Akash. The syllable Ka in Sanskrit means Akash, or the ether. And in the locative case in Sanskrit it becomes K. So Shabda K, I am the sound in ether. So we're looking at the Sanskrit word Ka. It means Akash. So when your chitta, your subtle body, is expanded in the Akash. Nicely, the syllable for nice or beautiful is Su. So Sukha means good ether. And Dukkha means, prefix means bad, it says. So Dukkha means bad ether. And so the words in Sanskrit for happiness and distress, Sukha and Dukkha, literally mean good ether and bad ether. In other words, it's precisely describing what we call happiness and distress really is, ontologically. Sukha means we're feeling a smooth and expanded, peaceful ether. And dukkha means we're experiencing a contracted, a congested, dark ether. Like that. Sukha and dukkha. Now, so how wonderful this is, you see? Because all the choices that you're making in your life, every choice you're making is to get sukha, to get happiness, and avoid dukkha. That's all. But if we don't know what actually brings the long-term sukha, we'll keep making the choices which actually bring about dukkha, suffering. And so that's called avidya. Patanjali defines avidya, one of the aspects of avidya, or ignorance, is accepting the objects that cause distress to be a cause of happiness. And then you're caught in that vicious cycle. So we have to hear again and again. Because not everything that glitters is gold. When a moth sees a flame, he thinks, sukha. And the moth flies into the flame, but what's the result? Dukkha. So in the same way, now I want to move on to some other topics related to this. You apply this idea to these other topics. So let's apply it to Dharma, religion. Now in Dharma, religion, there are some rules and regulations. Things you can do and things you should not do. You know, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, there are 5 yams and the 5 niyams. 5 things you have to do and 5 things you have to avoid. In Christianity, there are the 10 commandments. 10 again. Things that you have to mainly avoid. And so every religion has its set of do's and don'ts. Now a person in ignorance who doesn't really understand the essence of religious life, he thinks, religion is such a drag. Because they have all these rules that tell me I can't do all the stuff that I really like. No, it's not that someone one day came up with this idea. Let me invent this thing called religion, just to mess with everyone. Let's make a list of all the things that people like to do, and let's weave a narrative that says you can't do that. And see what happens. Right? Religion is not like that. All the do's and don'ts, the prohibitions and the recommendations of Dharma are actually there because the things that you should not do actually have the long-term effect of contracting your citta, causing contractions in the long term. We're not talking about the general person who has a very short sight and just thinks, whatever gives me happiness now, that's how I'll repeatedly find nirvana. No. The saints of the past have given a list of activities that if you do these activities, if you take intoxication, if you become promiscuous, if you kill other living beings, and so on, if you tell lies, if you steal, whatever it is, if you gamble, then all of these things will lead long-term to the intense contraction of your consciousness, and you'll be unhappy. And all the things that Dharma says, like you should give in charity, you should have hospitality for your guests, you should give tax to the king, you should worship the various devatas, and so on. All the things that religion says, you should take care of your wife and children. All of these things that Dharma is saying that if you do this, in the long term, that will lead to the gradual expansion of your citta within the Akash, and you'll feel sukha, happiness. That's what it is. That's dharma. So if you want a definition of dharma and dharma, dharma is that which gradually expands your consciousness, and adharma is that which gradually contracts your consciousness. And the more contracted your consciousness is, then when you die you have to take a body which corresponds to that level of contraction. So that might not even be a human body. Right? Because the animal's consciousness is very contracted. So culture is the same thing. If someone says, well, what is culture? Right? Real culture is a set of values in society where the architecture, the art, the music, the poetry, the drama is all aimed at elevating the individuals. Gradually, and that's why the high culture and popular culture are different. Because the popular culture is just hit me now with something that makes me feel good and then makes me unconscious for the next 10 hours, whatever. But the high culture, which is coming from the intelligentsia and from the clergy and so on, that higher culture actually brings the populace up and up and up. And so that's, by and large, in the modern time, the high culture's been lost in favor of the popular culture because you can charge everyone something. So religion and culture, they are meant for, culture means cultivation. It's a cultivation of the gradual expansion of consciousness. It has many, many interesting ramifications. So now we want to go on to another subject. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jaiva Dharma has described 5 degrees of expansion of consciousness. So the first one is called Achadita Chetana. That means covered consciousness, and that's the consciousness of souls who are in very lowest forms of life, such as trees and plants and mountains and whatever. Whereas gross bodies, where if you look, people would doubt whether this thing even has a soul or not. Does a blade of grass have a soul? You know? I mean, we know the criterion to establish the presence of the soul because there are 6 transformations: birth, growth, maintenance, the production of byproducts, dwindling and disappearance. Where these 6 features are present, it means that there's a soul there. Because the soul is present with the super soul. And without the super soul, then matter cannot organize organize itself into complex, reproducing, self-reproducing forms. That's God's mystic power. And without that, matter just doesn't do that. So anything which is showing these 6 symptoms, there must be a soul. Along with the soul is the super soul. And therefore you get this creation of complex order from what would ordinarily be chaos. Just matter left to itself goes into greater and greater states of chaos, right? It's thermodynamics. So those souls in the very lowest level of consciousness, that's called Achadita Chetana, covered consciousness. Then the next level is called the Sankuchita Chetana. Sankuchita means contracted consciousness. Contraction. Oh, while I'm on the level, I'm just going to make a little digression here. Contraction of consciousness. When a person's consciousness is expanded, then they feel some disgust at the presence of adharma. There's one story. Once there was a sadhu. He was at Govardhan. And he was just wandering at Govardhan, and a bus arrived there. You know, in the Govardhan town, there's a station, the bus. So many people. And then one woman got off the bus, young woman, and she was very beautiful. Extremely beautiful. And the sadhu looked, and he was just staring like this. And then someone said, "Do you know who she is?" "Oh, she's the daughter of such and such a person, one Indian lady, and one British, some dignitary from England. It was at the time of the empire, when they were ruling India, that time. and then he snapped out of his absorption, and he spat, and then he went away. Why? When he first saw her, he was reminded of the gopis. It wasn't that he was attracted to her. It was just something that triggered some thoughts about the Braja gopis. But then when he was told that she was a product, really, of what would Vedically be adharma, because it's Varna Sankara, because the various castes, they have pratilom and anulom weddings and everything. The anulom is okay. A male can marry someone from the same caste or lower caste, but if a female marries someone from a lower caste, it becomes the pratilom, and it's not so acceptable, and then in society you get the Varna Sankara, the mixed occupations and everything, like this. So, because she was a product of adharma, just the touch, just thought of adharma caused his consciousness to become sankuchita, contracted, and it was painful. So he spat, and then he went away, like this. So, and we see that in a very high example in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because Swarup Damodar Goswami never used to let someone come and read a poem or sing a song or do a drama in front of Mahaprabhu until he checked it first to make sure it was all perfect. There was no rasabas. There was no misrepresentation of transcendental mellow, or there was no the apasiddhanta, some wrong philosophical idea. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita it is said, Rasabasa jadi hoy siddhanta virod sahitina pariprabhu mani hoy krod. That if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw some rasabas or some apasiddhanta, some wrong philosophy, then he couldn't tolerate it and he became angry. Now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Tanadapi Swanechana, more humble than a blade of grass, Tarorapi Sishtana, more tolerant than a tree, right? But if you say a poem about Krishna and there's some rasabas in it, you become angry. What is this? Because if something is his consciousness, he's doing the leela of like a sadhak whose consciousness is expanded into the transcendental experience. And then if something which is against that, it causes the very rapid sankuchita, contraction, which is painful for the devotee. And so he become uncontrollably angry. Like that. So, I'm just giving an example of sankuchita in other contexts. Now in this context, achadita cetana, covered consciousness, then sankuchita cetana, contracted consciousness, means the consciousness in this context of animals. So you all know, if you have a dog or a cat or something, that they're capable of rudimentary emotions. Right? They become attached to you, they like you, they don't like someone else, they become happy, they start to wag their tail when they're happy. If they do something wrong, and then they'll become shy and hesitant, and so on. And there are many examples in nature. Sometimes if an animal's baby, like a monkey's baby, dies, then she's lamenting. The whole, whatever it is, the tribe of monkeys may all lament, or even take revenge against another animal that attacked them. So you can see, in the animals, the consciousness is there, and it's expanded enough for some rudimentary emotions, but not enough to get philosophical. Right? The animals never sit down and think, this is a dog's life. What am I doing? I've just had enough chasing cats, marking my territory on the lamppost. Why am I here? The animals will never think like this, because they have the sankuchita cetana. So then the next level, as the consciousness expands more, it's called the mukalita cetana. That is budding. If we say our consciousness is like a flower, this is the bud, which is just opening a little. Not really, the bud is still there, it's just starting to open. And human beings are in this state and the other two states. There are 5. So these 3 states, they're for human beings. So in this state includes the immoral atheists. Atheists who have no ethical values. But it also includes the moral atheists, those who don't believe in God but have ethical values. They're both included in this state, Mukhalita Cetana. Now, the next state of consciousness is called Vikasita Cetana. Vikasita means opening. Vikasit, opened, literally. So a flower now, the flower of the consciousness has not opened fully, but is open now. So this includes the theists, which technically should be more, because if you really believe in God, you will follow His instructions, however you conceive of Him. So the moral theists and the devotees who are practicing sadhana bhakti. They have a daily, because there are some persons who believe in a religion, but they're not actively engaged in a daily process to realize something. So there are certain persons who believe, well, faith above works. So if I just believe when I die, and then I'll get the ultimate beatitude. But then there are others who know the fact is that, yes, I believe in God, but if my consciousness is not expanded to the state where I can realize Him, I'm not going to get a free gift when I die. When I die, I'll just take birth in another body, and I'll just be in the same consciousness I was in the previous life, because you take the subtle body with you. So, in that state of Vikasita Cetana are the moral theists and also the devotees who are actually practicing a sadhana. They have a higher conception. They're doing sadhana because they've associated with an enlightened person, but their consciousness has not yet necessarily expanded beyond the spectrum of consciousness of others who are not doing sadhana yet. Right? Sometimes people think, oh, this devotee is like, he became angry and this and that. So, bhakti's not working, because it's just like everyone else. So yeah, he is just like everyone else, in one sense, because he's practicing, but not in such an intense way that he's actually really producing a transformation in his consciousness. And he's just doing a few stick around, every day like that. But he's not really practicing in an effective way to experience that transformation. Right? So, now, another interesting point here. If you compare the Mukhalita Cetana with the Vikasita Cetana, we see that the difference between the atheist and the theist is the expansion of consciousness. This is really, really important to understand. The atheist has no proof or evidence or experience that there's no God. And the theist also, in that stage, also has no experience of God yet, but he believes. But why does one believe and not believe? And this is very important. When a person does sinful activities, adharma, that causes the contraction of consciousness. And along with the contraction of consciousness comes the insight, the intuition into the causation of the world around us. You see? Just like if there's a cat and you throw a pebble at a cat, the cat will watch the pebble bounce, boom, 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 and then spin around and then stop. And then the cat's watching and thinking, what will the pebble do next? Right? Because when the cat is thinking about cause, he sees the superficial thing in front of him and he makes a causal closure there. This thing that I'm seeing is the cause of itself. You see? So that's a cause and effect is like a chain that goes on and on and on. And at the end of that chain is God. Right? But when the chitta, when the consciousness contracts, then that contraction causes a causal closure that you stop at a particular point. What's the cause? What's the cause? The cause? What's behind it? And I stop there. Because your consciousness isn't expanded enough to conceive of further and further intermediate and more intermediate and more remote and ultimate causes. So the cat is seeing and watching the pebble. I remember when I was a little kid, I would make a little paper mouse on the end of a string And you put it down and the cat sees it, and you pull the string and the cat jumps. And just when the cat jumps, you pull the string again. And the cat's like obsessed with trying to catch this mouse. But he can't figure out it's just a piece of paper and you keep pulling the string. Right? Now, dogs, on the other hand, are completely different. Right? You try that with a dog. Put a little paper cat on the end of a string and pull it, and the dog looks at you. Are you stupid? Right? Huh? You throw a stone at a dog. The dog doesn't watch the stone, where did it go, waiting for the stone's next move. The dog just looks up, who threw that at me? Right? Because the dog's consciousness is more expanded than the cat, so he thinks in terms of the chain of causation, goes a little bit further. You see? So the same with human beings, right? The consciousness, when it's more expanded, we say, well, what is this? It's made of atoms or something like that. But there's just, then a causal closure comes. It's atoms, boom, stop. Right? But what is that made of? 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 So as the consciousness expands, more and more, it comes to the sarvakarana karanam, the cause of all causes. That there must be, see, there are 5 elements everywhere. Same 5 elements. Why have they organized themselves into all these different forms? What's the cause behind everything? So the more your consciousness expands, the more you conceptually have a kind of X-ray. You have a conceptual X-ray to look through things conceptually and come to the last point. So that point is, the person intuitively feels there's a God behind everything. Now what happens is, when a person does a sinful activities, it contracts the consciousness, and their consciousness becomes eclipsed, and they become incapable of conceiving of the idea of God. And this is why it's very important. In Vedic society, the Kshatriyas would go round punishing people who did sinful activities. Right? They would drive them out of society. Because they knew that innocent persons, by associating with them, perform the adharma, it contracts their consciousness, and then they just can't conceive of, you can talk to them about God all day, and they just don't get it. Right? Because it's the function of the expansion and contraction of consciousness. Understood? Okay. So, you have achadita chetana, Sankuchita Chetana, Mukalita Chetana, Vikasita Chetana, and then the last one is called Purna Vikasita Chetana. Fully expanded, that's like a lotus flower that's fully open. And that is the devotees who've attained Bhav, the state of Bhav. Now what happens is that when the devotee is chanting, so first of all, when you're chanting, what are you doing? You're applying your mind on one thing. So if your mind is focused on one thing, what happens to the mind automatically? Expands. Begins to, the prakasha, ulas begins to take place. So if you chant with concentration, you will feel happy and you will feel peacefulness. But as the chitta becomes, all the vrittis die down and it becomes steady, then only the abhas, nam abhas, begins to give some realization of the beautiful form of Krishna. And then his qualities and associates. Kanaka jaladagatro, nila sonapjanetro, mrigamadavarbalo, malati kundamalo, tarlatarunavesho, nila pitambaresho, smaranibrita nikunje, radhika Krishna Chandro. So nice. Huh? So we want to be in that state where we can sit and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. And the chitta is expanded, you feel blissful and shining. And there you see Kanaka Jaladagatro, 2 bodies, one like a rain cloud and one the complexion of molten gold, Radha and Krishna. Nila Pitambaresho, Krishna's wearing a golden shawl over his shoulders, and Radhika's wearing blue cloth. Mrigamadavalavalo, they're decorated with fragrant kasturi tilak. And Krishna's wearing a garland of soft white fragrant kunda flowers, and Radharani is wearing a garland of soft white fragrant jasmine flowers. Smarani Britani Kunjay Radhika Krishna Chandra. And you see the beautiful secret meeting in a very secluded kunj on the bank of Jamuna of Radha and Krishna. Vishuddha Sattva Swarup, rays of joy are emanating from both of them, and you just become lost in that. That is Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Completely bathing in their sweetness. So, that is the Purna Vikasita Chaitana. When now, actually the Purna Vikasita Chaitana happens when meditating on the beautiful form of Krishna and following the mood that is inspired by our Gurudev and following the associates of Krishna, then one becomes blessed with a beautiful transcendental body. You see that in your meditation, your spiritual body. And then when your chitta becomes tadatmik with that Siddharup, gopi form, then that is the fullest extent of the expansion of the chitta. The chitta becomes tadatmik, one with that. And then, at the end of, one experiences the direct service of Krishna at the end of life, yam yam vapismam bhavam, chajatyanti kalevaram, tam tamivaiti kuntyasa tatat bhava bhavitaha. Just as Bharat Maharaj thought of a deer at the last moment of his life and became a deer. If you are absorbed in your spiritual body serving Radha Krishna at the last moment of life, then giving up this body you enter into the eternal pastimes of Krishna. And that is the result of the Purna Vikasita Chaita, the fully expanded Chitta. So this was our verse for today. We're discussing Akash, how Akash accommodates the vrittis, how there's expansion and contraction, what are the different levels of expansion, and the ultimate level of expansion is the tadatmya, the oneness of the chitta with one spiritual body. Guru Premananda. So that's an overview of the psychology of Vedanta. Are there any questions? Yes, Prabhu.
What about these folks who are theists, but they commit lots of sinful activities? I mean, it doesn't seem that would stop them from being able to believe in God. They may be very, I believe in God. But
well, that's an interesting nuance. That means, you see, if a person deliberately, knowingly and callously engages in activities which are not pleasing to God or are contrary to the evolution of the soul in his journey towards God, then they don't really believe in God. But if they say, I believe in God, it's not an intuitive experience, but it's more of a social convention. They've been born in a situation and they've learned it socially from others, and so they go along with that. And so they would not really be necessarily considered in the category of Vikasita Chaitana. Because actions speak louder than words. So from the lips they say they believe in God, but it's more of a social convention. Because if you really believe, then why would you? Why would you say, I believe that fire burns, and then you put your hand in. Right? So.
But they don't in their teachings and stuff, or deeply in their teachings, but other than that, they do think that they're not doing anything wrong.
That's another thing. That's not the same. If someone is knowingly doing things which are against Dharma, then they don't really believe. It's just a social convention. But if someone truly believes in God, but there's some activity which from the Vedic perspective would be considered adharmic, but within their religious and social context is considered acceptable, then it's not really a problem for them. They'll progress. Because they're praying, they're glorifying God, they're singing hymns or doing rosary or whatever it is. And that's very powerful. And so Namabhas destroys the reactions of all sinful activities. So they'll be protected, and they'll gradually make progress, they'll gradually make advancement. Because they don't have a duplicity, a crookedness. they're being as honest as they can in the circumstances that they find themselves. So, yes.
I'm thinking, for example, the religious orders, convents and monasteries and things like that, where mostly they are not vegetarian, just a few, but and they're serious about their practices, their meditation, their prayer, and all that. But then they sit in front of a big piece of meat, you know.
Yes. So their kirtan, their singing of hymns and glorification of God and meditation will neutralize those reactions. But what we see actually with these orders, they have, even though they may not be strictly vegetarian, but many of them actually are practically vegetarian. And for example, if Coptic Christians, they have to do a complete vegan, be completely vegan for over 200 days of the year, and so on. And so those who are doing, that's just the regular people also. And so there are many injunctions even within different groups of Christianity to not eat meat, or to be vegan on certain days, or just do complete like fasting at the time of Lent. You know, it's really very popular. Especially in Russia, Russian Orthodox, they all fast during Lent and so on. And so, but then when you have monks living in the monasteries, they do so many austerities. And so in the Bible, there in the epistles of, I believe, Paul, he says, "Be far away from the wine bibbers and the ravenous eaters of flesh." So it's right there also in the Bible. People who eat meat and take intoxication, don't associate with them. So that means you shouldn't do it yourself also, obviously. That's included in that. So the holy name is very powerful, so you should consider that. You know, another thing is that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jivadharma said, for someone who's in the mode of ignorance, to, say, eat meat or something, which is an ignorant activity, for him, it's not so bad, because that's his level of consciousness. You see? It's really sinful for a sattvic person, say, born in a Brahminical context. If he were to do it, it would be very sinful. And so the reaction is proportionate to the amount of responsibility each person has, and that responsibility is proportionate to the knowledge and understanding and the context in which they live. Just like if a child goes into a shop and grabs a pencil, he's not going to be arrested. They just slap his hand and put the pencil back. But if a grown person walks in and grabs something and walks out with it, he'll be arrested, because he should know better. So with more knowledge comes responsibility, and then if you do something wrong, then the reaction is proportionate to that also. Yeah. Any other? Yes.
Prabhuji, I had a question regarding dreams. I just have so many dreams, and I tend to remember even when I'm in the wakeful state. Is there any significance of any dream, or is it just impressions purely?
It's impressions, but dreams can be significant. They can be. Everyone must have experienced déjà vu.
Yes.
Right? So in Vedanta Sutra it says, dreams may have a prophetic element. So Paramatma creates that, because it's inexplicable. So dreams may, by the function of the supersoul, have some prophetic element. It's explicable in one sense in terms of samskars, because the present has its roots. It's a manifest reaction of the past, and the future is the unmanifest potential of the present. And so there's a chain. So that's one thing. There can be a prophetic element to a dream. And if you associate with spiritual personalities, then, especially, my Gurudev said, in the early morning, just before sunrise, during the Brahma Muhurta time, or just before the Brahma Muhurta, if you have a dream at that time, you may have a dream of your Guru, Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru, or someone, and it may really be an instruction. But that should be confirmed. You can go and open your heart, and it should be confirmed. Because it may be just because you ate some cheese before you went to bed and it gave you a weird dream or something. But you can have some spiritual inspiration may come by the mercy of transcendental personalities at that time. but you should confirm it. So the example is there of Srila Rupa Goswami. When Srila Rupa Goswami, he was writing a drama, and he was traveling from Vrindavan to Jagannath Puri, and on the way he stayed at a village called Satyabhamapur. And at night in a dream he saw a goddess who said, I want you to write a separate drama about me, and by my blessing it will be exquisitely beautiful. And he woke up and he realized that goddess was Satyabhama herself. So he was writing a drama of Krishna in Vrindavan, and then how he went to Mathura and Dwarka, and the marriage with Satyabhama and so on. And now he realized that in the dream Satyabhama had told him to divide the drama into two parts, a Vrindavan part and then a Vrindavan Mathura Dwarka part. So he was traveling and he came to Jagannath Puri, and when he arrived there, Mahaprabhu said to him, Krishna nyoya disambhuto napunasostatapura Vrindavanam prachadya sakochin naiva gachati. That Krishna, who is the son of Vasudeva in Mathura, is different from the Krishna of Vrindavan, because Krishna never takes one foot outside of Vrindavan. So Mahaprabhu said that. So then Rupa Goswami realized, first I had the dream, and then when I came to Mahaprabhu, he externally also confirmed, and so I'm going to divide this drama into two dramas, and it became Vidagdha Madhav Natakam and Lalit Natakam. So. Yes, Prabhu.
When a person is given full anesthesia, what happens to the vrittis and the soul? What happens to it?
Under anesthetic?
Yeah, full anesthesia.
Uh-huh. So then he'll go. He may go into a dream state and into a deep sleep state. So if someone wakes up from anesthesia and they don't remember even dreaming, then they are in the dream state. But rarely. But sometimes it happens that someone has the subtle body comes out and they have an out of the body experience as well. Sometimes that happens. But generally people just go into swapna or shushupti. Yeah. Because that's only possible because of the senses and the pran, which are part of the gross body. The subtle underpinnings of the gross body become affected by the chemical, and then that affects the chitta, and then that brings the chitta into tamagun, becomes prominent, and then they go. So these interactions between the physical body and the mental states all take place on this disnyatvam, on this foundation that accommodates their meeting.
Is it possible that some of the things that the Vedas describe as being dharma and adharma are based on social convention, or like what would be the difference?
No. Because Vedic society is a product of the Vedic description of dharma and adharma. You see? So the social conventions of Vedic society haven't sprung up through just traditions among the people. They're coming down. Everyone's thinking that this is right, this is wrong, because they learnt it from the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas studied the Vedas and told them, and they're following that. But it may be that sometimes some traditions come about just by chance among the people. So Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur gives an example. There was a little boy, and his father was performing a sacrifice, the fire yagya. So there was a cat, and the cat kept coming in and going here and there, and you're not allowed to let the animals go by the yagya. So then his father just got a stake and knocked it into the ground and tied a piece of string and put it around and tied the cat there, so the cat couldn't go into the yagya. So the little boy saw that. Then when the little boy grew up, and he had a family, and he wanted to perform yagyas, they were getting everything ready. Okay, we've got the yagya kund, we've got the ghee, we've got the flowers, we've got the puja and everything. And then he remembered, oh, we have to have the cat. And so he knocked a stake in the ground, got a cat, tied it up, like that. And so then it became a tradition. So, yes, in Vedic culture, it's coming down, it's coming from dharma and adharma, but because often there's a lot of confusion, and people do whatever they saw their grandmother doing, something like that, then it can get mixed up with just social conventions which are product of, historicity. Just the develop.
So then how could you discriminate between the two?
Yes, that's very good. So that comes in Krishna Leela, you see. Because Nanda Maharaj was getting ready with all the Brijvasis to worship Indra. Right? And Krishna came to him, "Oh, Papa, Papa, what are you doing? Go away and play." And he said, "What can this little boy understand?" "Oh, Papa, Papa, please tell me." So in the end he said, "We're going to worship Indra." And Krishna said, "Well, is this Lokik or is it Vedic? Is it Lokik means just a convention that people do, a tradition that came from people, or is it actually Vedic?" And then Nanda Baba was like, "Oh, well, you know, it's Lokik. To tell you the truth, it's a Lokik thing. But anyway, my forefathers did it, their forefathers did it, so we consider it to be our inevitable and unavoidable karmic duty. We have to do it." So then Krishna said, "But when you follow the Vedas, this makes a positive result. When you just follow Lokik things, then it's not effective. And everything we do should be done with proper knowledge. You see, and this is why Krishna was able to persuade him to not worship Indra and make all the offerings to Govardhan." So your question is, that's one of Krishna's tricky questions. So you can do that in any situation. Some devotees say, "Is this Lokik or is it Vedic? Or is it Tantric?" Because we actually follow a combination of Vediki and Tantriki. Vediki and Tantriki. For example, we remember Brahma Gayatri. Brahma Gayatri is Vedic. But Gopal Mantra and Kam Gaya is Tantric. So our daily sadhana is a combination of Vedic and Tantric practice. And Krishna says that in the 11th canto, Vediki, Tantriki. He tells Arjuna, the best path is this, the supplement, that the Vedic and the Tantric path supplement each other, and that's the process you should follow. Yes?
I wanted to ask you, like in India, a lot of yogis would consume weed, right, to do sadhana. Right? So does that expand consciousness, or are they? Just want to understand what's your perspective on that.
Well, you know, anything that promotes sattva gun, sattva is light. So that's the prakash, that's the ullas. So anything that promotes sattva gun will expand the chitta. But we should know that unless we do bhakti, we take shelter of the process of bhakti, the expansion only expands up to the material sattva. And material sattva is never completely pure. Three gunas can't be separated from each other. So in material sattva, there's always some rajas and some tamas. Maybe very little, but it's always there. So any yogic process, like Patanjali's process, it can only take us up to the highest awareness of sattva. And that's why Patanjali says that the perfection of trance, samadhi siddhi ishvara pranidhanat, the perfection of trance comes by surrender to God. And how do you surrender to God? Tadjapas tadbhavatanam, by doing japa and meditating on the meaning of the japa. And what is that japa you should do? Tasya vachakaha pranavaha. You should chant the syllable Om. So Om is actually a name of Krishna. So Patanjali, along with his physical system, he has in the states of dharan, dhyan and samadhi, concentration, meditation and trance upon the holy name in the form of Om, and meditation on Paramatma, the four-armed Vishnu form in the heart. So it may take one up to, because there's an element of what would be called...
He asked about use of ganja.
Sorry. No, he said yoga.
Weed. He said yogis doing ganja.
Oh, yogis doing ganja. Oh no, that's totally bogus. They're just hippies. Yeah, they're just hippies. They're just getting stoned and going in the mode of ignorance. You can see they don't even take a bath once a year. You know? So yeah, that's nothing.
Any experiences if they're...
You can see them fighting over the chillum. Yeah, they become like animals, completely useless. But there's a sutra in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra that says one can expand the consciousness through the use of aushadhi, herbs, mantras and jewels. Right? And so I've even seen among the devotee community, The devotees quote sometimes this sutra of Patanjali that says you can expand your chitta through the use of herbs, and therefore it's okay to get stoned and smoke ganja, right? But if you look at the tikas, if you look at the commentaries on these verses written by Patanjali's disciple Vyas or Vachaspati Misra or any of the main commentators, they all explain that this aushadhi is actually a herb from Swargalok. It's from the heavenly planets. So you have to come into this state where you're actually having a perception of the demigods, and then they come to you with this herb from, it's not even from planet Earth. And this has an effect of expanding your consciousness. So yeah, that sutra of Patanjali is a very poor excuse. And you know, we have 4 regulative principles, and one of them is don't take any intoxication. And that's it. So we shouldn't try to circumvent that in any way. Okay? So it's getting a little bit like, what I'd like to do is sing a kirtan. Everyone can have the benefit of the holy names. We'll serve prasadam, and then those who need to go can go, and those who want to ask more questions. Gaura Premanande Hari Om.
They're going to want to leave right after the kirtan, so I'm going to have to get myself together. This is yours.
Everyone come make a circle. Close the circle. Circle. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is calling you to his Maha Sankirtan Ras. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Hare Hare.